I am Nicholas, Bishop of Myra. You call me Saint Nicholas or Santa or Kris Kringle, depending on which century you're stuck in. I died long before your talk shows, your cable news, your hashtags. And yet, every December, I watch people shout my name at each other across screens, as if I were a political slogan instead of a man who once walked through real streets trying to keep real people alive. You say there's a war on Christmas. If there is a war, it is not the one you think, and if anyone is losing, it is not me. In my time, the empire was Rome. It did not complain about cup designs. It nailed people to wood and left them to die. It did not worry whether you said the proper greeting at the door of a marketplace. It worried whether you bent the knee when it told you to. Christmas, in that world, was treason. You imagine it now as a cozy scene, a glowing manger, gentle animals, a silent night. But the story you tell each year is about a poor couple turned away from decent shelter, forced to give birth where animals feed. About a child whose existence terrifies a king so much that he orders a massacre of boys to protect his throne. About a god, if you believe the story, choosing not a palace or a capital, but the edge of empire in a people under occupation. Christmas is a festival about power stepping down, not power being flattered. I lived a few generations after that story began to spread. I was a bishop in a port city called Myra, in what you now call Turkey. I did not live at the North Pole. I did not have reindeer. I did not know what a loyalty program was. I knew prisons. I knew poverty. I knew ships that did not come back. You call me patron of sailors now, as if I spent my days blessing little boats on postcard. In Myra, it meant standing in a harbor that smelled of salt and fear, watching families count masts on the horizon, wondering which storms had won. A bad season was not a talking point. It was widows and orphans. When you treat an exhausted warehouse worker as disposable so that your packages arrive on time, you are serving the same God my sailors feared, the God of schedules that must be kept, no matter who drowns. They tell one story about me more than any other. A father, once wealthy, ruined by misfortune. 3 daughters, of age to marry. In our world, without money for a dowry, a girl was in danger. Your polite translations say she might be forced into a life of sin. I will use the real words. He was going to sell them into prostitution, one by one, to survive. He went to bed planning a sale. He woke up to find a bag of gold on the floor. Someone had thrown it in through the window. It was enough for a dowry for the eldest daughter. No sale, no brothel, no life used up for other men's pleasure. The same thing happened again for the second, and again for the third. He never saw who did it. That was the point. They tell other stories, too. A famine in Myra, stomachs shrunken, eyes dull, grain ships in the harbor, loaded with wheat, measured and sealed for the capital. The sailors told me they could not spare a single measure without answering to the empire. I told them the empire could wait, empty bellies could not. They unloaded the grain. Myra ate. Let the paperwork sort itself out later. That is what charity looked like in my city. Not sentiment, but defying the rules, when the rules meant people starved. You have turned that into a cute image of stockings and coins. Fine. But do not forget what it was about. The quiet interruption of an economic machine that eats the poor first and girls fastest. That is what I tried to do, again and again, in whatever small ways were given to me. Interfere with the normal cruelty of the world. Once they say 3 men were marched out to die for another man's bribe. The sentence was legal, the paperwork in order, the sword already drawn. I walked onto the execution ground and took the blade from the executioner's hand. I did not ask whether this was the proper jurisdiction or the correct procedure. I asked who had sold their lives. The judge confessed. The men lived. That too is Christmas work, stepping between power and the necks it is ready to cut. Fast forward to you. Now my face is on plastic cards that let you buy things you cannot afford. My name is on sales events that begin in November and bleed into January. I am a mascot for delivery schedules, inventory targets, and quarterly earnings reports. You have stretched my feast into a sales quarter. You have also conscripted me into your culture war. I listen while you shout at each other, "Keep Christ in Christmas." They're canceling Christmas. Say Merry Christmas, not Happy Holidays. I watch men in suits, rich beyond anything I ever saw in Rome, go on television to tell millions of comfortable people that they are victims because a cashier said, "Season's greetings." And I think of that father standing over his daughters, wondering what their lives are worth in coin. You talk about a war on Christmas in a nation where your majority religion holds more power than any group I ever saw, and then you use that imagined war to avoid noticing the real wars you are losing. You are not being persecuted because a coffee cup design changed. You are not under attack because your neighbor celebrates a different holiday or none. You are, however, under judgment from your own story every time you drive past someone sleeping in a doorway on your way to a store lit up like an angel's nightmare. You sing about peace on earth, goodwill toward men, and then argue that food assistance makes people lazy. You place nativity scenes in front of buildings where you draft policies that make it harder for the poor to receive medical care. You hold up the image of a refugee child in a manger and then argue that children at your borders deserve what they get because their parents brought them here. If there is a war on Christmas, it is fought in budget meetings, not on coffee cups. Of course, the merchants are glad to help you not notice this. They will happily sell you a Keep Christ in Christmas ornament made in a factory where no worker can afford a day off in December. They will encourage you to shop Small Business Saturday while quietly crushing small businesses with their own pricing. They do not care what you say in your greetings, as long as you keep tapping your card and clicking Place Order. On the other side, some of you congratulate yourselves on being above it all. You mock creches and crammed parking lots and sentimental hymns as if you have escaped the economy that feeds on your fears. Then you go back to your own forms of status and distraction, satisfied that you are not like those people. You are no closer to Christmas than they are. Because here is the difficult truth. Christmas is not about which team gets to feel righteous in December. It is about whether the most vulnerable people in your society are any safer because you claim to celebrate it. In my world, that meant asking whether girls would be sold because their fathers were broke, whether prisoners would rot unseen because they had no one to speak for them, whether storms would take whole crews because no one bothered to build lights or safe harbors. It meant asking whether the hungry would be told to wait because the grain was already spoken for, whether condemned men would die because it was too embarrassing to admit the verdict was bought. In your world, the faces and technologies have changed. The questions have not. What does a war on Christmas look like now? It looks like housing policies that quietly accept children growing up in cars and motels. It looks like wage structures that force parents to work through every holiday while politicians praise family values. It looks like detention centers where asylum seekers spend their holidays behind fences while people in nearby churches sing about a holy family turned away from shelter. It looks like systems that treat the life of a child or of an exhausted warehouse worker as an acceptable cost of guaranteeing 2-day shipping before the 25th. You do not need atheists to destroy Christmas. You need only a critical mass of people who love the story and ignore its claims on their lives. You can keep your slogans. Say Merry Christmas, say Happy Holidays, whisper Festive Solstice if it pleases you. None of that threatens me. I have been dead for more than 1,000 years. Your greetings do not harm me. Your indifference to the people I tried to serve, that is another matter. You ask then, what it would mean to stop fighting over Christmas and start keeping it. I am not asking you to abandon your lights or your trees or your songs. Humans need festivals. They need warmth in the dark, reminders that the year turns, excuses to gather and sing. Those are not the enemy. The enemy is the lie that you can have the feeling of Christmas without its cost. What would it look like to win your war on Christmas in my name? Begin close to home, but do not stop there. Ask, who is better off because you celebrate? If the answer is only your own household, you have thrown a very nice party. You have not kept a feast. Ask, is there someone in your town, your building, your city, who will be alone, hungry, cold, or afraid while you sit at your table? If so, then Christmas, by your own story, belongs to them first. I am not giving you a new performance to stage. The kind of charity I try to practice is not about posting pictures of yourself ladling soup. Remember, I threw the gold through the window at night. The father did not even know who had helped him. If your generosity does not cost you comfort, it is probably just decoration. You might decide that for every gift you give within your circle, you will give another beyond it to someone you will never meet. You might decide that instead of arguing about greetings, you will spend that time making sure a local shelter, clinic, or food pantry can keep its lights on in January when the songs have stopped and the bills still come. You might decide that if you are going to fight politically in the name of Christmas, it will be over policies that actually change the lives of the people Christ came from and for, the poor, the sick, the imprisoned, the stranger. That might mean you find yourself angry at people you once voted for or allied with people you were taught to despise. So be it. Allegiance to a story about God choosing poverty should never have sat comfortably with allegiance to comfort. You do not need to believe what I believed about God to see the point. A society that treats its weakest members as disposable has no business wrapping itself in a holiday about divine solidarity with the weak. So, call off your invented war. Stop letting men in expensive studios tell you that you are under attack because someone at a counter tried to be inclusive. Stop letting corporations sell you your own anxiety back to you with jingles attached. If you want to defend Christmas, defend the people it was meant to honor. Defend the child whose parents cannot make rent this month. Defend the migrant who crossed a desert for the chance to feed his family. Defend the clerk whose smile you insist on, but whose schedule and wage you never question. Defend the neighbor who has no one coming over when the lights go up all around them. Hang your stockings, light your tree, tell your children stories of flying reindeer if you must. They are easier to explain than Greek bishops. But when you speak my name, remember who I was, a man in a battered port city, trying with whatever coins he could spare to interrupt the normal cruelty of the world. If you continue to fight over which words you say at the register and ignore the people whose lives are staked on your choices the other 11 months of the year, then Christmas will survive in your schedules and your sales, but not in your souls. And no law, no court case, no viral rant will bring it back. But if, even quietly, you turn your attention and your resources toward those your own society has priced and discarded, then I tell you this. You can call the season whatever you like. Christmas will be safe. And before I return to my rest, I must thank these mischief makers of a most excellent adventure for dragging an old bishop out of the grave and shoving a camera in his face. In my own time, I had no microphones, no broadcasts, no platform. I had only a harbor, a handful of coins, and whatever courage God would lend me. To be allowed centuries later to remind you who I was and what I tried to do, to interrupt, even a little, the normal cruelty of the world, is a gift I do not take lightly. If you have ears for this, do not let it end with me. Subscribe to this project, share it, argue with it. Let these restless dead trouble your conscience. Listen to the philosophers, the rebels, the saints and scoundrels they summon. Let them nag you into becoming kinder, braver, harder to buy. I am Nicholas of Myra. You may keep your Santa if you must. But if you would honor my name, then keep watch with these travelers, and turn a little more of your December into mercy.